Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Chris, your sneaker professor. And this week's topic is something that I was written. Somebody inboxed me and said, hey, what do you think about all of this Yeezy, Ivy Park, Adidas issues? And he said, what do you think about sneaker culture putting a bunch of misinformation out about Yeezy and Adidas and Yeezy coming back together? And I said, I don't get into those kind of discussions. I kind of look at the data and then I do my own research and then I make an analysis and I'll write an article. So I wrote an article, and it's right here on the side. You guys can go to the description, click through, and read it. It's going to be a ton of information in this video, but all of it is in the article. And if you want to read it, you can simply read it, or you can just listen to this video. Adidas, Yeezy, and Ivy Park. Sneaker culture needs nuance when discussing the business of kicks. Now, it's important that I define nuance. And nuance is a subtle difference in shade of meaning, expression, or sound. And when it comes to sneaker culture, what tends to happen is inside of the echo chamber of the community, people will put information out and they'll say things, and it has this kind of finality to it or this more dramatic appeal. And the culture revolves around more hype and more clickbait than it does true information. So nuance is something that is required so that we better understand it. But right now, sneaker culture is kind of up in arms. And over the last week or two, they've been screaming, I told you so, Adidas. And that's because Adidas said that the Yeezy sneakers that they have in inventory will weigh on the brand's 2023 revenue. That happens more than anyone understands. This is not the first time for something like this to take place. That inventory will be an ongoing problem for Adidas. But if they get rid of it during the next few months, it won't carry over to the other quarters. It will weigh heavily on this year, though, because of how much it is. And if they find a solution, they can either write down the inventory, they can destroy it, or they can decide to sell the inventory as is. The new CEO, who was the former head of Puma, Bjorn Gulden, he did state in a CNN article that Adidas isn't an efficiently operated company. And this is what he said. The numbers speak for themselves. We are currently not performing the way we should. Sneaker culture, though, does not look at this new CEO as a part of the changeover of what's happening to Adidas. So it's very similar to 2014. Now, I wrote about this in an article when Yeezy was basically removed from Adidas. And I explained that this moment in time for Adidas is very similar to 2014. I'm going to get into that in a second. But the fact that the new CEO acknowledges that the company isn't performing the way it should, that's a key point that should be focused on. But sneaker culture, instead, they're only focused on Yeezy because that's all they care about. And that Yeezy inventory. And then they're focused on these reports about Ivy Park and how it's underperforming. So the inventory issues with Yeezy and the low sell-through on Ivy Park has led to these kind of outrageous statements of "Yay made Adidas, Beyonce ain't yay though," and it's a weird thing for people to say. But there's like this all-in attitude for Kanye, and that he makes or breaks a company. Does it hurt Adidas? Definitely. But sneaker culture needs to discuss these things with a bit more nuance because sneaker culture actually holds the key, maybe one of the keys to the solution for Adidas's problem with the Yeezy product. So I wrote this article. If you see it here, is Adidas in trouble without Yeezy? And the goal was to deliver vital information on Adidas's growth and revenues to show that the brand would encounter short-term issues due to the loss of Yeezy. $1 to $2 billion is a huge hit. That's what the loss of Yeezy is to Adidas. But here's the catch. Adidas's biggest growth was prior to Kanye. And that spike was almost $9 billion in growth. In that post, I established that Adidas North America relied way too much on Ye. So with North America losing $1 to $2 billion when the market is $4 to $5 billion in this region, and Yeezy was generating most of that revenue, is super serious. So I get where sneaker culture thinks that this is just going to kill Adidas, but we have to have nuance. All right? It's super serious. But here's the thing, in the US since 2016, as Adidas Yeezy was rising, Adidas stopped innovating and releasing new and inspirational products. You have to remember, at the same time that Kanye came along, Ultra Boost was hot, NMD was hot, Superstars were hot again, Stan Smiths were hot again, Pharrell was even hidden. There were so many different factors that were going into Adidas's rise. Everybody conflated it with Yeezy, and that was wrong, and nobody should have done that. And yeah, it's really important that Kanye did what he did because you can see clearly the influence in the financial numbers for Adidas. But what Adidas did, I labeled as silhouette fatigue. So around 2016 or so, 2018, from 2016 to 2018, things started to slow down for Adidas, and people didn't pay attention to it because Kanye was starting to rise. And in North America, Kanye's rise kind of took the place of innovation. And I started talking about what's called silhouette fatigue. And if you look over here to my side, you'll see this article on the Pro Fear. And then you'll see a second article inside of that article. And this is what I mean. There's a ton of information available for nuance to be added. And that silhouette fatigue kind of hurt Adidas in the lifestyle segment, but it wasn't all true because at the same time, Adidas was focusing on Adizero. So, Adizero, which is in the running division for Adidas, it's been a revelation. Those shoes are incredible, man. But because North America focused so heavily on Yeezy, these shoes like the Boston, the Takami, the Adios, these running shoes got completely overshadowed. Overshadowing the running performance market, basketball, and everything else. It contributes to a lack of Adidas talking about the way they've developed all of these new products that they have, and it doesn't allow Adidas to engage a different consumer in North America. It's important to note the focus of what I'm talking about is for North America. All right? And this is a problematic region because of the mishandling of basketball. Remember when I announced that Fear of God was no longer involved? And they're focused solely on fashion versus function in North America. North America for Adidas is a $4 to $5 billion business. And just to prove that, this is Adidas's website, and you can see clearly that in 2021 they had a 17% gain up to $5 billion. So you take North America at a glance and you're like, dude, they were crushing it in 2021. That does have a lot to do with, we go back to that post about Adidas being in trouble. Overall, the company is a $20 billion brand. Adidas will be fine. Nuance. Nuance. All right? That 4 to 5 billion that Adidas makes in North America being hit with a $1 to $2 billion dump of product places North America for Adidas in a comparable space to New Balance, who's a $5 billion a year company. Under Armour is a $4 to $5 billion company. And Brooks is now a $1 billion company. Adidas North America is threatened for sure. But when sneaker culture is talking about this, they need to specify and say North America. On Running is growing. Hoka is growing. Hoka is going to hit a billion. When they announced in their quarterly report coming up, or in their report on their fiscal last year, Hoka's going to be $1 billion business. So you have this amazing growth across the board in North America and with these smaller brands. And for Adidas, that's a pain point, and it has to be. So this is why Yeezy is problematic for Adidas. But sneaker culture discussions haven't introduced the reality of inventory. Now, to talk about inventory and the issues around it and how destructive it is for different brands when they start remaindering and destroying inventory. Remember those words, remaindering and destroying. This happens all the time. Now, just a quick focus, real quick. This is my shoe company, Arch. And you guys see Arch, it was a sneaker company before. So in 2013, I created this colorway that you see right here. And when the shoes arrived, I found that the factory had left visible design and pattern lines all over the upper of the shoe. I couldn't sell the shoes. I was going to try to sell them and make donations to charity with the money, but I was like, nah, I can't sell these shoes. So I either had one option. I could write off the shoes and destroy them, but I decided to donate the 36 pair, only 36 pair. That's all I made of those pink shoes that you see over here. And I donated them to a women's shelter in San Diego. And I took the write off, right? Now, if I had deep pockets and I would have made $2,000 to $3,000 of those shoes in that year, it would have completely destroyed me as a business. Now, it did lead to me kind of falling apart as a business later. All of these things are cumulative, but I'm not getting into that. The reason I'm bringing this up is because in footwear and apparel, luxury businesses, all of these different companies destroy product. And that's a point that sneaker culture hasn't jumped in on. And I'm like, hey, let's add more nuance to this discussion. So I included a link in this article too. And I'm opening this up so you guys can see it. Why fashion brands destroy billions worth of their own merchandise every year. And that's on the Vox website. And the link is in the article. So when you go to it, you can read it. But man, it's a horrible situation with this clothing that gets remaindered. And this is why. What I did is a completely different thing. I sent shoes to a homeless shelter for women. For these big giant corporations, when it goes unnoticed, nobody knows. But then when it's found out that they're destroying this stuff, it's frowned upon in a major way. So if I'm donating sneakers, adidas could do the same thing. They could donate it. But when you go back and read this article on Vox, these brands, they are not donating it. They destroy it. So you're talking like Burberry and H&M, even Nike, which everybody overlooks, destroy this product. Now they can't do it anymore. Nike has created Nike Grind and they started breaking down shoes. But a lot of that stuff that's not burned or kind of created in some way, it ends up in landfills. Now, there are companies like Sneaker Impact, and I'll open that up so you can see it. They basically started this business where you can recycle your shoes, and anybody can. So you can send shoes in, but Adidas could connect with a company like Sneaker Impact, right? And that way they don't have to destroy the sneakers. But this is the thing. Adidas can't destroy that Yeezy product because the board and the C-suite would go nuts. The optics in destroying the product would be horrible for Adidas. They could work with Sneaker Impact. But the alternate solution, and this is why I keep bringing up nuance and sneaker culture, is that sneakerheads could come together and actually ask Adidas to release the product at a lower price, donate partial proceeds to nonprofits, supporting focuses on race relations and education. Sneaker culture could bring up the idea of destroying these sneakers or letting them go into landfills is very bad and the optics are terrible. But instead of offering solutions, sneaker culture is expanding the discussion around Adidas can't work with anyone but Kanye. And this discussion is creating misinformation which could negatively impact Adidas. Now, sneaker culture is also conflating the Yeezy problem with the Ivy Park stuff. And I want to talk about that as well. So Ivy Park is a completely different thing. And it's emblematic of Adidas's problems in North America. Now, we know Beyonce is worldwide, but particularly in North America, she's huge. Adidas had a lack of research on the women's marketplace. So I'm switching gears here, going from Yeezy to Ivy Park. I've explained for years that the women's market requires data, research, and insight on that demographic. Now, there's a solution that's kind of sitting in the lap of sneaker culture for Yeezy. But for Ivy Park, there is another solution as well. It requires a bit of an analysis because Yeezy was so big and powerful. And I'll go to that information on North America. Because Yeezy was so big for North America, it maxed issues with Ivy Park, it maxed issues for Adidas North America altogether. But now that the crutch is removed, because Yeezy was a crutch, North America has to learn to walk again. And that's a good thing for Adidas. So think about this. It expands opportunities. But with Ivy Park is kind of a similar story, and it revolves around fashion and entertainers. So here's a quote on Ivy Park from CNN Business. And they explained the losses like this. They said, and they were reporting from Wall Street Journal, that sales of the once trendy streetwear brand Ivy Park fell 50% last year to about 40 million, way below its internal projections of 250 million. The partnership is strong and successful, Adidas told the Journal in response. Now, I have an article on athleisure as it relates to Ivy Park on the site. In 2016, Ivy Park attempted to relaunch after House of Darien kind of collapsed. And I explained and wrote a lot of information about Ivy Park. This is long before it connected with Adidas, right? But my writing on the Ivy Park relaunch, as a matter of fact, let me open that up so you guys can see it. I know there's a lot of information here, but remember, I'm not attempting to kind of, you know, give you guys nothing information. I want you to be so informed. And here's the article on Ivy Park that I wrote, and that was back in 2016. I want you to be so informed that no one can that people can have better conversations about this, right? What the Ivy Park thing, the relaunch did, is it reminded me that I did what was called an in-store visits, right? And I did interviews with store managers at Foot Locker to ask about women's sportwear, because if you walk into a traditional Foot Locker, not the new power stores, if you walk into a traditional Foot Locker, there's typically no women's apparel inside a Foot Locker. Think about the last time you went and what you've seen. They have women's shoes and they have them in a very small section or a bigger, broader wall, but there's not a lot of apparel for women. One second. All right, to continue this long, I got a phone call. It disrupted us for a second here. Let's get into it. I started this in-store visits interviews with these Foot Locker managers at the time. And I know I'm jumping from topic to topic, but there's a lot of stuff here that I'm trying to get into. And I was asking about women's sportswear. And the gist of that whole discussion was pretty simple. Foot Locker has more store locations than any other sneaker retailer in the world. Foot Locker at that time had yet to announce that reduction in Nike inventory. But Foot Locker had closed Lady Foot Locker stores. Now, I put a chart here so you can see it. And I want to cut to the chase because I know this is long. When you compare Foot Locker to Finish Line, they built an entire dedicated women's department inside of their larger stores. So they had a whole section for women. A lot of it has been closed off, but even Finish Line had begun making private label clothes for women also. Foot Locker removed the Lady Foot Locker stores and never created an in-store option to serve women at their traditional doors. I'm trying to get to some solutions here. How does all of this relate to Ivy Park and how sneaker culture can help? How does it relate to that? When looking at the reduction of Nike product today at Foot Locker, the absence of the improvement of the women's demographic inside of Foot Locker is one of the reasons why they fell out of favor with Nike. And I know this is broad and sweeping. Foot Locker, though, is correcting this error. And you see this chart where they have all of these stores and there's only 14 Lady Foot Lockers. This is an updated chart from Statista. Their power store development is going to correct a lot of the issues with how Foot Locker kind of failed women for a long period of time. So when Puma, Nike, and Adidas ramped up product development for women, they have been completely ignored. So like I said, with this Statista chart, you got 14 Lady Foot Locker stores. There's 800 Foot Locker stores in North America. And those new store formats, Foot Locker hasn't changed the visual merchandising in the old stores. But imagine this, and I'm going into solution mode now. Imagine if Foot Locker redesigned their regular stores and delivered a women's section, which included apparel. And Adidas could have this kind of research from streaming data and other insights for Beyonce, and they took those collections and they placed them into the Foot Locker doors. I think Adidas misunderstood who Beyonce's consumers were. Adidas also overemphasized Yeezy, right? If sneaker blogs and sneaker media and sneaker influencers focused on the fact that if Adidas destroys that Yeezy product, it could bring enough negative attention to Adidas that Adidas will release that product. Begin to talk about not destroying that product. Begin talking about the fact that people will take it on if Adidas makes donations. I'm in solutions mode here, right? Work with Sneaker Impact. Whatever it is, if sneaker culture is vocal enough about this product not going into a landfill, if sneaker culture is vocal enough about Foot Locker carrying Ivy Park, maybe, just maybe, Adidas can unload the product at a break-even point and begin to roll out new strategies without the weight of Yeezy on their fiscal year. Nuance. Nuance is needed in discussing both Ivy Park and Yeezy. Now, there's a bunch of articles. If you look over here, there's a bunch of articles on women in sneaker culture to add layers to the analysis of Ivy Park. And the post above where I talked about Burberry, all of these different posts of Adidas and the Pro Fear, all of that information is in there that you can look at. And I hope you read it. And I hope that sneakerheads will add more data and research to their dialogue instead of sound bites and clickbait threads. The information is out there. That's it. I know it's long. It's always long with me. It's like a podcast. Just think of it that way. Put it on, turn it on in the background, listen to it, go and read the articles later. I appreciate all the new subscribers, which is not that many because I'm not putting sneakers up every day. But that's cool. I really love the fact that a lot of you are digging the longer format. Thanks to everybody out there, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.